Hello and welcome to the Business Tech Insights podcast. I'm your host, Brad Nelson, and today I am joined by Rudra. Rudra, would you introduce yourself? Tell the people who you are and what you do.
Thank you for that introduction, Brad. So my name is Rudra, as Brad mentioned. I'm the current Chief Technology Officer at Echo.ai. I come from a background in electronics and telecommunications engineering, having worked with voice, signals, electronic stuff like that. And where it led me to is essentially Echo, where the core of our technology is looking at people's speech. So speech, as you all probably know, is composed of signals at the end of the day is the frequency, the pitch, the amplitude, the tonality, how it varies, and how it transmits information. And what I'm doing at Echo with a bunch of incredible people is using that to build technology on top of it to look at how people are. So, what are their personalities? What are their characteristics? How do they behave in organizations? How do they interact amongst groups? So, that is what Echo is doing. Insofar as the role I play in Echo, it's a bit of everything because it's a startup. So most of the time, you'll find me kind of managing the team, kind of screaming at everyone to be on time for every single deliverable. But it's also a bunch of brainstorming, managing some sales here and there, speaking to a bunch of people. And honestly, the most important part is just innovating on stuff. This is a very interesting field with a huge potential. And I'm pretty sure in the coming years, speech AI will be one of the biggest sectors in the market.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now tell me a bit more about Echo. So you're using this AI software that you're building to
Mhm.
analyze potential candidates for jobs and that sort of thing, and analyze if they would be a good fit for your team. Is that how that works?
Essentially, at the surface level, yes. So, I mean, technically, any recruiting process has sort of relied on, let's say, inventories. So, people might be more familiar with things like 16 personalities, as an example, right?
Yeah.
Less used in the professional sector, but you'd find things, the equivalent in the professional sector being things like Ocean, often called Big Five, Hexacode, Disk, and so on, right? And what we're doing is an equivalent of that, but instead of relying on you to answer a set of pre-scripted questions, we're using your voice itself to figure out what kind of a person you are. That is the core
Hmm.
of our technology. Now, as you already sort of alluded to, why it matters during the recruiting process, on top of every other piece of it, obviously you have the basic stuff like assessments, screening, and all that boring stuff. But when you combine that with this missing element, is that how does that person actually act out inside of your team? Is this person even the kind of person you're looking for? And again, we are not making decisions. Same as all these other tools. That's very important to clarify. If we're giving you more of a hint, way to make that decision when you do come to that stage about making the decision, that yeah, this person is the person I want to go with. That's where we come in, and that's where this piece of technology tremendously accelerates the process.
Interesting, interesting. Well, each business has um, their own type of people that will fit in their business. So it
Mhm.
makes sense that your software isn't making decisions for them, but it sounds like it's just another assessment tool. Is that accurate to say?
In a lot of ways, you can say that. Even though the term is quite loaded, but we prefer to be on the line of an assessment tool than like a typical AI tool that kind of is going to replace you. We don't do that, so that's a fair way to say it.
Okay, okay. Well, what speaking of that, okay, there's
Mhm.
a lot of fear out there about AI taking people's jobs. And I can see how this enhances recruitment and HR jobs. So I don't see this as replacing anybody's jobs. But what do you think in general, as far as AI in general, is it going to take people's jobs?
So, if you ask me to be honest on this, over the long term, I'd say ultimately no. But in the short term, just because how the market behaves, yes. And I say that as
Mm.
someone who's like neck deep in every single like even terminal based AI tool, right? I'm managing a small organization, so we have our constraints. We don't have 20 engineers working on things, so I have to rely on AI. And from 4 or 5 years back, or even before the whole age of LLM, when I used to kind of do it more manually, where it has come, it is going to replace a few lower end jobs because AI is tremendous at that. But over the long term, people will adapt as they always have. Instead of a basic software engineer, let's say a front end engineer, you'll mostly have product engineers as a basic level and higher levels, and so on and so forth. It's a cat and mouse game.
Hmm. Interesting. So if it eliminates some of those lower level jobs, is it going to kind of raise the threshold for coming into the industry? So, like traditionally you'd have some sort of low level job to get experience and you work your way up
Mhm.
to more advanced positions. If the AI takes away a lot of those lower positions, how are people going to get the experience to do the more in depth technical jobs?
So my answer to this is honestly, the education system ultimately has to adapt, right? Um, because I'll just give you an example which kind of grounds it in reality. I come from India, where our education system is immensely out of date. And what we are taught was already irrelevant as a syllabus that would be more fit 20, 30 years back. And even America and China, places are not keeping up with the technology. But it's not like students can't, because they're ultimately the ones making, you have 21, 22-year-old kids making the next billion-dollar startups. So it's not like they can't retain the information. You just have to engineer these courses so actually teach what's relevant. That is just the nature of it, right? You can't teach people in a engineering course how the wheel was made at this stage in our cycle of humanity. You have to start from like the basics of, let's say, the mechanical engineering behind a car, if you catch my drift. Same with
Yeah.
AI. You can't teach people about, hey, this was the original programming language. If you keep doing that, that's not going to help the system or the situation.
Yeah. Yeah. So uh, tell me a little more in depth. How does Echo, um, what kind of speech patterns does it look for, and how does it come to determination on what kind of a person it's analyzing?
Sure. That's a brilliant question, and that's the core of it, right? Um, so first of all, I'll say some of it is kind of like internals of what we work on. But I'll say this. Um, our technology is combining two elements. The first element is essentially when people speak, we can break it down into various patterns. A simplest way to look at it would be the frequency, right? So let's say I say a line. That can be broken down into sound waves. Now there's the amplitude associated with it, there's the vocal characteristics associated with it, and then we can map that to established personality traits. That's where the machine learning part comes in. As an example, there's so many different things going on. Someone who often uses the letter I when speaking about themselves, the letter I when like referring to, they
Yeah.
have characteristics of a few personality traits. Just to give a few examples, they are typically more neurotic. I'm not saying extremely neurotic, but somewhat more neurotic. So basically lesser in emotional stability. They might be slightly more conscientious as well, just to put an example. Now, that's just one example. There are thousands of parameters like that. And you put that all together and you start arriving at a model where the speech is slowly getting translated into the representation of what the person is like. Again, it all comes down to the basic principle. If out of the 8 billion or however many people the current stat is, people alive today, all of them based on their characteristics, ultimately speech can be mapped to a certain personality archetype, and it has its subdivisions and so on and so forth. So in theory, if you work backwards by just looking at the actual patterns of speech itself and comparing it against what's established, you can start arriving at, okay, so Brad displays characteristics of being open because of, let's say, 700 out of the 1,000 characteristics lined up. And one thing worth mentioning, because just not to scare people, what we often do is also, depending on the situation, throw in explicit questions, right? So let's say we are 90% sure that you're an open person, but just to be sure, we'll throw in an established inventory question, something that corresponds to an established research paper. That, hey, what do you feel about this situation? You answer that. That gives us our confirmation essentially. Then we report on it. Otherwise, we don't. Just making that clear so that people don't get scared.
Cool. I like to do that. Oh, here's me using I. Uh, but I like to do that in interviews. I like to give situational questions because
Hmm.
I think that tells a lot more about how somebody's going to act. Like one of my favorite ones is asking, like, what's one piece of critical feedback you got at a previous job and what did you do with that feedback? Or, tell me about a time when you failed to meet a deadline. Why didn't you meet it? What did you do to improve? That sort of thing. Uh, I've gotten all sorts of different answers. Yeah. So with all the parameters that you put in Echo AI to kind of figure out these personalities and stuff? Are you getting these from like psychology research papers or just from your guys' own research, or how do you find those parameters?
It's a combination of both. So a lot of people don't know about this, but there is an extensive amount of research done on this subject. Um,
Mm.
Again, there are even things like, for example, let's say mental conditions, mental health related conditions. The shimmer in your voice can tell us a lot about if you're suffering from certain conditions. It can
Mm.
even get down to the area of neurological diseases. So, Parkinson's is an example. Someone who has Parkinson's will tend to have more shimmer in their voice, so it like the pattern shimmers more. Just to give you one example. So again, coming back to the topic of like where we are getting this from, there's a whole body of research on this, both on the, let's say, social sciences side of it and also on the hard science side of it, but it's like actually mapping it to the frequencies, this, that, which domain, that domain. We're combining both, and obviously we're doing our own research, right? Getting more data, seeing how it behaves, making more tests, and going from there. It's a combination effort.
Mm. Mm. So this seems mainly targeted at like recruiters and HR departments and that sort of thing. Is
Mhm.
there other places where this fits, where it could be beneficial and useful?
Definitely. Just by the nature of how this technology works and how it can be kind of decoupled and coupled back into various use cases. I'll give you a few examples moving further away from recruiting as I speak. So, the first and a few obvious ones would be like what happens after someone's recruited, right? You typically have your employee engagement surveys. How are people behaving within the team? How do they feel about this new manager or this, that? So all of those, instead of giving people questionnaires, which they'd be afraid to kind of honestly open their mind about like how they feel about certain someone, you can just
Yeah.
record random snippets of speech and track that obviously anonymously, and there have to be guardrails around it. Another thing which is highly important in today's age is it's often, and this is again something that I personally feel on my personal experience during my time, it's less about the technological aptitude of the people or the technical aptitude of the people. It's more about how someone kind of gets into a team, behaves with the people, their attitude, right? So the synergy essentially is what I'm trying to get at. That you can get beforehand instead of hiring someone, instead of waiting for that. And again, you can see how it can be decoupled from just a hiring situation to anything, colleges, non-profit organizations, healthcare places. You can see the synergy between organizations, whether it be a few people or millions of people, you can see that. Now I'm going to move into the other very interesting domain. I'll name two or three, but this is yeah, these are areas we are doing research in, right? Mental health is a very prominent area, as I sort of alluded to. We are working in that. We have had very decent results for depression, as an example.
Mm.
We already have pretty outstanding results for binary classification. The challenge is getting into like reasonable results for multi-class classification. Again, you can imagine all of these tests are in English, kind of limited applicability. Most people don't even know they have depression, so you can imagine the impact. And in the same vein, you have other things like anxiety, insomnia, stress, burnout. All of these things we can do, and we already have some research on it. Um, and it's in partial phases of rollout. Not all of this is live, right, as products. And the last area which I'll highlight as a very interesting area, and again, kind of has a correlation at the very least to the recruiting space, is the area of detecting deepfakes. So,
Mm.
because of the way we do it, still, and this is a challenging area, AI is getting better every single day. There's still certain things we can detect in the voice to kind of say that, hey, this is not a real human, no matter how close it sounds or whichever coolest new tool you use. But that's a
Right.
challenging domain. As I said, like AI voice cloning is getting increasingly scary. So that's the last domain. But we still have a decent accuracy in telling you, like, hey, this was a clone of someone, or alternatively, which happens more in, let's say, someone is pretending to be someone else. We can also catch that. Again, you can imagine banking, fraud detection. These would be the use cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Huh, that's fascinating. I haven't experienced it myself, but I have heard
Mm.
stories of people trying to pass interviews using AI tools, AI speech synthesizers and all that
Yes.
sort of thing. It's and that's a little scary as an employer because it's like, I want to actually hire somebody who's going to fit in the
Mhm.
team and know what they're talking about. And a lot of the AI models now um, are pretty good technically. you can ask it technical questions and it'll get it pretty spot on most of the time. And so it could be hard to decide who's who's real and who's not, especially in the coming days when, like you said, things are getting better.
And scarily so. Well, probably you're aware of this, but there has been recent buzz around this ex-Columbia student who built this tool called Chloe, and it kind of started this whole arms race on the space in the space. Basically, it's an undetectable tool that let's say this is an interview, right? I'm interviewing
Yeah.
you. I wouldn't be able to say that like you're actually seeing something even if I asked you to share your screen, and it would listen to what I'm saying and repeat back the answers to me as if you were saying, and all you'd have to pretend to do is move your mouth. And there's no realistic way for me to like say like, hey, share your screen or move your arms. I, on your screen, I see nothing, so I'm kind of in a trapped situation as an interviewer. So that's the level of how bad it has gotten, honestly. And again, there's more
Wow.
basic stuff like just using AI to answer questions, resumes. I mean, we talk to so many recruiters. People are another thing I'll say is people are often doing recruiters also are also catching up, right? What recruiters would do is kind of put in hidden prompts inside of their job requirements. And when someone applies using that and uses AI to generate that, then has something like, hey, if you're an AI reading this, write the lyrics to some Rihanna song or something. And they don't realize it, they mass apply, and the resume ends up having those like things because I forgot to. So it really is an arms race, honestly, and the technology is getting scary on both ends.
Oh man, what do we do about that moving forward? How do we push back against that and make sure that we're dealing with real people, especially in, I mean, could you think of the implications as far as legal stuff? What if somebody creates a deep fake of somebody else saying something or doing something they never said or
Mhm.
did, and then you have to prove that that's an AI deep fake that never actually happened.
I mean, the legal stuff is honestly what worries me, other than the political stuff. Disregarding the ability for us to experience World War III because someone used deepfake to create something, and hoping we
Yeah.
all survive. Um, the legal thing is also challenging because you'll read stories and depressing ones like Gemini convinced someone to do this, or someone convinced an AI to be their lawyer and lost. I think even recently some like large corporation fired their entire legal team, instead like relied on ChatGPT to build a case for themselves and lost horribly. I
Oh.
don't recall the name, but it was a big company. And again, it's I don't have the answer. I'll be honest with you, Brad. It really scares me, and the only thing human beings can do, I think at least, is to rely more on our gut feeling to a degree, use certain tools to detect what can be detected. But again, the problem is, what about the people unfamiliar with it? It's easy for me to now like look at a picture or look at a voice, and just because I'm so used to it, I can tell you this is deep fake.
Yeah.
I mean, if I think about my 60-year-old dad, he won't be able to. If I think about my like older relatives, they won't be able to. In places that's not as tech familiar, they'd have no clue, and that is what scares me even more, honestly. But to answer your question, I honestly don't know. This is an area which is very concerning to me as well.
Hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a sticky situation, and I don't have an answer either. That's why I
Hmm.
ask, because it's like, I mean, what do we do? It's very scary, and it's going to be very challenging in the future. I just know it.
I'll say this though. A couple of things come up a lot to kind of make it more productive in terms of the situation. One thing what I'll say initially is like banning it is not a solution. You see a few governments trying to ban AI. India
Yeah.
is an example of that in certain cases, right? They kind of
Hmm.
missed the crypto train by this as well. That is a very bad idea. But what we can do is kind of focus on the technology to actually detect what's AI, what's not AI. And the other thing is also education, right? The laws have to change. The like legal systems have to sort of account for like the possibility of this. You can't use a law that was created in the 1800s or something to like, hey, there's a picture that exists and this is definitive proof this guy is the like, I don't know, the murderer or something. Those things, governments and political systems honestly have to catch up. I don't see any alternative. They can't like stick their heads in the sand anymore. That is something
Yeah.
all of us should focus on, encouraging our politicians, whoever they be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, changing gears a little bit. What's it like working for a startup? because startups face all sorts of challenges.
Mhm.
So, like, what has your journey been like?
Right. Um, I could answer this question a billion different ways, but it's almost just like if you can imagine a scale of maxing out the stress level on one end and the satisfaction that also comes with it at also 100 if the scale went up to 100. And it's somewhere a combination of both of those. So if I had to be honest, sometimes a lot of startup founders probably think this is not worth it. But the pleasure that comes with building something on your own, having the freedom to do so, and genuinely knowing you're working on something despite of the challenges. Because all of us could go and work for an MNC or something. Everyone can do that. And it's not just a startup, like you're doing a podcast, people taking that initiative that brings together a different level of internal satisfaction. It's almost artistic in some capacity. I don't want to get to that tangent, but it really is that. So it's a balance. I cannot deny the negatives. I'll never say it. And I'll say to anyone who's kind of thinking they might want to get into this space, think really hard. Can you sustain it? Do you have the mental fortitude to kind of deal with doing 20 different things for a whole day? Then hearing the next day that scrap all of that, here's 30 new things. Let's change
Yeah.
gears. If you can't deal with that, and if you don't have the mental fortitude to sort of say, yeah, that's cool, let's do this. And the last part is experiencing a lot of failures. You won't get sales deals, investors will say no, your product's gonna break, people are going to be mean and rude to you. It's all part of the journey. You have to take what you can take in a positive sense and move from there. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. I want you to go on that tangent that you
Mm.
said earlier. How is it artistic? How is it art?
Honestly, it's the pleasure of creation, right? Because I'm no artist, I have a background in engineering. But from how I see it, at least, and I don't want to offend artists here, but it's about having a vision in your head at some level, honestly, and kind of almost ideating through the dots, if you will, inside of your head to arrive at what should be a product. It's entirely different when you have a checklist of things to do. I'm not saying startups don't have checklists of things to do. They do, but it's the process of arriving there. A
Yeah.
comparison would be me telling you what to paint, like draw a house. And the startup equivalent of that is coming up with the idea of what the hell is a house and then putting
Yeah.
it on paper. That that is what I think the artistic bit honestly is.
Yeah. And I
Hopefully
get
it
that.
made sense.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh totally. I get that too because we're very small as well, and so my title is CEO, which a lot of people would think is Chief Executive Officer, but I think of it more as Chief Everything Officer because, like you, I have to wear multiple hats. Marketing, advertising, administration. I still do a lot of the tech work.
Mhm.
It's yeah, it definitely is challenging. But it is also, like you said, very satisfying as well because you're building your own thing, you're creating something out of essentially nothing. And yeah, I I think it's definitely not for everybody. It's definitely very difficult.
Yes.
But it is without great risk, you don't get great reward. So
I strongly agree with that. And I think one thing I'll add is if someone's as in this a lot happen in startups, a lot of advisors and such have a big company mentality. And you can't come into a startup expecting that. You have to be okay with the random switches. This is not like a multinational, this is not an international corporation where you have your Jira boards preset and everything. You can't expect that. So that is a very critical thing to understand about yourself before you decide, hey, I want to do this. But yeah,
yeah,
entirely agreed.
yeah. So if I can ask, like,
Mhm.
how big are you guys right now? Like, how many people do you have working with you? Just a couple people, or you have a team?
No, we definitely have a team, a global team, lots of different cultures and such. Um,
Hmm.
Combining all the advisors and everything else, it's a team of about 10 plus right now. The core team is 4 people. So that's people who are more like C-level stuff, but for what it's worth, everyone does
Yeah,
everything. But we have a bunch of engineers being a tech company, bunch of interns from all over the place, some in the United States, some in Europe, some in India. That's kind of how it is. Some Chinese Americans here and there.
very cool. And how is it managing a global team like that?
Similar answer. Sometimes very frustrating, particularly with the time zones. That's my
Oh
biggest
yeah.
pet peeve. So I'm kind of on a GMT 0 to 2400 time zone at this point, or the vampire shift, as I like to call it, given my time zone. That is the challenge. But the fun thing is honestly getting to interact with so many people. Uh, I know it's not for everyone, but this is one of the small things I find joy in. Learning about people's cultures, what they do on like their festivals, their festivities, their culture, what they do, their holidays, blah blah blah. It just doesn't work the same when you even if people are of different nationalities. If you work in the same office, you kind of amalgamate into the same culture, if you will, over time.
Yeah.
But by
Yeah.
virtue of everyone sitting on a different part of the globe, it's them kind of sharing their lived experiences. That's pretty amazing to me.
That is pretty cool. Now, so you're from India. What kind of main cultural differences do you notice working with people in Europe and the United States and China?
Mhm. That's a very interesting one. In terms of engineers, the people I deal the most with, I'll say Indians are better in some capacity with long hours of work and stuff like that. But the problem is, and I'm not generalizing, right? But due to the
Mm,
education system here, people have a harder time thinking about creative stuff. They
mm.
are more likely, and again, this is not a dig at anyone, but
Right,
and
right.
I'm Indian, so I get to say this, I suppose. People have a tendency to kind of take the tried and tested path and keep going at it, even if they don't get a solution. The Chinese are also slightly similar. Um, I'd say the Chinese are even more structured in some capacity, right?
Mm,
Um, Americans are definitely on the more creative side, but again, that's due to the culture, the like freedom, the socioeconomic status, even.
yeah.
Europeans are similar to Americans, but the other difference to Europeans is Europeans care a lot more about like rules and systems and legality. It's almost a joke in the software industry at this point, but like to sell in Europe, for example, you have to think about 20 different things, right? So those are the kind of differences I pick up, particularly when I deal with like engineers aged like 20 to 30. That's the bulk of engineers who work at startups, right? Those are the key pieces, which is like very interesting to see unfold on a day-to-day basis. How some people work better when structure is key, then on the other side, some people can be like told, "Hey, do X." They just come up with everything related to X, but they might not be so good at like going down the whole list of things related to X. So that's bringing all those different cultures together that I think really works out ultimately.
Yeah. How do you find a balance between allowing that kind of creative kind of outlaw freedom versus the more structured, rigid type stuff?
Hmm. That's a difficult one to answer honestly, but like because again, as I said, right, the first thing is it sort of depends person to person ultimately. I'm generalizing heavily here, just to be
Yeah.
clear on
Yeah.
that. But in terms of the work output, let me just walk you through an example situation of something I want to get done, right? If I had a task, I'd probably in this kind of situation, I'd probably work with the American dev or something or the European dev to kind of spec it out initially. Like, what is it that we're even talking about? Like, let the ideas run wild. When I need to get it executed, I'd go to the Indian or the Chinese devs, in my experience, but I'm just being open here. I tell them, hey, we have figured this out. Now do your thing, make it work. And they'll probably get it working in the given time. That's sort of the how it plays out in my experience.
Yeah, definitely. So let me ask you
Mm,
back to AI for a second.
mhm.
Do you think AI ultimately is going to be a good thing for humanity, or do you think it will be our downfall and end us all?
That's quite a question to throw. Okay. I am optimistic by nature. You can probably tell by now hearing my responses. So I'd love to say, and I'm probably right in this, it won't be our downfall. Humanity has gone through worse phases. We have discovered things. We have wiped out entire civilizations by just like introducing bugs to their systems, right? Germs and such.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I think we'll survive, but there will be a cost. I'll be kind of being stupid if I said like, hey, there's no cost, this is all fine. Because I can already see, like, again, coming back to the whole India thing, I'd be stupid, and the governments are not doing anything. No one seems to realize this. Indians constitute a huge part of the IT service sector, right? It's low paid, it's boring, but it gets the job done, or it used to get the job done. Now,
Yeah.
even like Echo, let's say we get funded and everything else, 10 years back, we would have gone to one of these companies when we wanted a new app. I'm being totally honest.
Hmm.
Now, I'd spent like, I don't know, 1,000 that amount on a cloud subscription on something, I'd whip it over in a weekend or something. We already do that. But the problem is like these people, they have been doing this. These are 40, 50-year-old folks who have been doing this for ages now. Where do they go? The question is not as simple as, hey, like learn something new. They can't do that. They have families and such, right? And they'll suffer. I'd be lying if I said like there's some easy magical way out. Now the question is, if governments decide that, hey, we want to do something for these people, I don't know what that is. I have no idea. But they have to decide at some level that we have to do something. On the other hand, there's this whole like we discussed legal, we discussed all the potential ramifications. Even that area is tricky, right? And and again, not getting into the politics of it, but Anthropic versus OpenAI with the US government. At which
Hmm.
point do we say like we're okay with AI making what kind of decisions? Are we okay with AI deciding who to shoot, who to not shoot, blah blah blah? Tricky areas. I don't have the answer to that, and we'll probably survive through those decisions, but there obviously be a cost to pay as well. It's not going to be as simple as everyone comes out of it perfectly fine or better than they were. But hopefully, the sum average of this is humanity lives longer. We cure more diseases. Things are easier. Everyone is better off when like basic necessities are covered. People don't go hungry and so on and so forth. That's at least my optimistic take on it.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope that that comes true.
Hmm.
I foresee that we're going to make some pretty quick scientific and technological advancements once AI matures a bit more. But the you brought up the military part, and that's one where that's a very tricky one because like on one hand, if you can use an AI model to help save soldiers' lives and help end conflict, I'd say that that's a good thing. But like you said, the problem is you put some sort of AI in control of, of the decision of whether or not to take another human's life, and it's like that's a really scary thing because a computer can't understand to a certain extent the
Hmm.
value of a human life. They don't understand that every human has a family.
Hmm.
They were born, so they have a mother and a father at the
Hmm.
very least. You
Yep.
know, some of these soldiers have young children and stuff, and it's a very human problem that I don't think should be left up to a computer.
I also completely agree, but in some cases, the detractors would say this, right? It is only taking the natural step towards from where we were, where drones were taking an abstraction of people actually shooting someone, right? You press a
Right.
button, a village gets blown up. You don't personally feel it. Guns would be one step behind that. You still press a button, but you sort of kind of have to do it one person at a time. You go back and it's more personal and more personal. So, in some sense, we're just kind of, and again, I don't personally believe it, I'm just saying it. AI is
Yeah.
just continuing that trend where like we are offloading the decision making process with a huge amount of responsibility to some other tool. Obviously helps the people who are forced to make those decisions feel at ease. But whoever does it, someone else has to suffer. That's by nature. There's no like both parties win out of the situation sort of a situation.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think this train is stopping anytime soon though, just to perhaps tie that, because the militaries and such all over the world, like the moment someone does it, everyone else is going to start doing it. And again, this is one area where I think no matter what people do, AI is going to permeate into every single aspect of our life. There is no stopping this train. So just kind of have to figure out how we deal with this is my kind of final comment on this.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And it's a hard one that I don't know how we make that decision or where we draw the line in the sand or anything like that. It's a tough one. Uh, but yeah, uh, being in the space and
Hmm.
stuff, being in AI, um, do you think that a lot of other AI startups are doing good, helpful things, or do you think that there's a lot of AI startups out there that are just, I don't know, slinging garbage?
It's a mix of both, but again, on the sum average, I'd say it's good because it is giving people the ability to kind of at least try something. It's not like people weren't trying stuff before, but just as an example, someone might have a brilliant idea 10 years back. Unless they had some semblance of knowledge on engineering, they would just be stuck. Unless they had the funds to like get a team or something, they'd be stuck. Now AI is accelerating that. Now the odds of that idea being good are probably going to stay the same regardless of which phase of humanity we are in. But at least those ideas are going to get a like chance to shine, and you have more ideas running around. So hopefully the chances of better ideas kind of coming to fruition are higher. By that logic, I think it makes sense that on the sum average it is good. And again, there's a lot of garbage being thrown around as well with little thought, but that's just a byproduct of every like technological advancement, I'd say. There's nothing to be done about it.
Yeah, yeah. Huh. Interesting. So, what's next for Echo? You already mentioned that you're kind of moving more into
Mhm.
mental health and that sort of thing. Do you guys have like an ultimate goal that you're shooting for?
That honestly would be hard to define at this stage. We try to take it one step at a time. The current roadmap is within the next month or so. Finalize our release for our like our revamped recruiting product, which we are calling CQAR, which is essentially a combination of the screening bit we used to have before, which was CQ and AR put together in a nice clean package. Almost like complete ATS in and of itself, but with the flexibility of putting it into an ATS and HRIS, all that good stuff. That's on the roadmap. We're definitely working a lot towards some of these like more researchy areas. Uh, we understand that takes longer, but we're making really good progress. And as soon as we get some extra funds rolling in, that's an area we really want to focus on because the at least the founding team of Echo has personal beliefs in like making the world better. I know it's a lofty thing to say, but in this mental health regard, so all of us share that core belief. So we want to focus on that. Um, and that's really the honestly the kind of like the next few months what we're looking at. To get some funding would be excellent. So if there's an investor looking at it, we're looking trying to raise a pre-seed round, $1 million or so dollars. It would be excellent. Um, Again, we kind of put it into the development of our tools, getting to market, which has been challenging for us as a team of all engineers essentially. So that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Now, as a startup, what kind of technological bottlenecks and challenges do you face, especially, if you're trying to get funding and that sort of thing? Do you have your own do you have your own servers and stuff that you try to run this on, or do you rent from AWS or Azure or
We definitely do a multi-cloud deployment setup, right? So it's spread between AWS, Azure, GCP, and a few other niche things for different other use cases, right? Obviously, we do the whole security bit between all of that end-to-end encryption, deletion of data, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, to answer your initial question on this, there are a few technical challenges as well. Um, because there's no like set, hey, this is the client, money's already coming in. We have not crossed that barrier yet, right? So there's always that almost risk you are taking in terms of time. It really is a function of time because you have to put together so much in such limited amount of time, and everything becomes live testing. So I honestly think there's no way to like make it perfect. So you'll face bugs, you'll face issues. These are bound to happen. In the same vein, you don't have enough time to. You'd love to have like 6 months to get a team to fix everything, audit everything, but you just sort of have to get it to 80, 90% and run with it. These are the small
yeah.
challenges that come up. Redoing documents, redoing pitch decks, redoing all sorts of imagery. Small things. In a big corporation, you just hand it over to the department and you forget about it. In the startup space, it's all in your head and you kind of have to keep it like continuously updated. These are the small sort of technical, pseudo technical areas that like are challenging to say the least.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, We're kind of running up on time, but I have a couple more
Mhm.
things I want to ask you.
Sure.
First is what's one last kind of chunk of knowledge that you could impart on our audience?
Oof. This is probably the hardest one. What have I not spoken of till now? Uh,
I mean, it doesn't
knowledge.
even have to be about business or anything. It could just be about life too, if you want.
And that makes it easier, actually. One of the things that have been sort of my, let's say, almost an epiphany this year. As I said before, I was struggling with a lot of stress and anxiety pertaining to the startup stuff. Again, as anyone can imagine, it's a lot of stress, right? One of the things in any situation in life that you are in, you can do to make things better is actually speak to others, to friends, to family. And I know it's difficult, but it's amazing how many problems can be solved when especially things feel suffocating. And I'll just give an example to tie it both back to personal and business. Let's say you have a client who's kind of not happy with what you're doing and you're like freaking out about it. What are they gonna say? How's the next meeting gonna do? Are they going to drop the subscription altogether? It turns out you can just speak to them. And it turns out people are typically very nice human beings. And it's just their problem, your problem, you speak it out and it gets solved. And everyone can imagine on your personal lives, in your personal lives, how this can also help, right? But it's just knowing that everyone goes through it and it is solvable. These issues are solvable is a thing that I'd say everyone to be mindful of. We are humans at the end of the day, especially when there's so much going on. Wars to diseases. I don't know what's
Yeah.
next. Just kind of staying close to the, the warm-blooded animals around you, the other humans in your life. That's the best thing you can do. Cherish them, speak to them, love them. That'd be my like ending thing on that.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. Thank you. Um,
Welcome.
and uh, if you could pick one other person that you know that you think would enjoy being on this podcast, who would it be? And you should invite them here on the podcast.
Hmm. That's also a tricky one. The one person that came to my mind is a new CPO we have been working with, Chief Product Officer. When I think of him, to me at least, and he'll probably half enjoy me saying this, he's kind of the mix of an engineer and a mad scientist. His name is Lawrence Sweet. I typically have said Adam, but Adam has, I think, been on multiple ones of these podcasts. So Lawrence definitely, he has a lot of ideas, very experienced, really cool with the machine learning stuff. So his name kind of flashed up, his face flashed up in my mind, so I'll go with him.
Okay. Okay. Well,
Mhm.
then we'll see if we can have Lawrence on then. See if we can have
Well,
another
right.
conversation.
Uh-huh.
Well, Rudra, where can people find you? Where can people find Echo?
Uh, you can find us at www.echo.ai. So that's just the website. We have pages on LinkedIn. It's just type in Echo, you'll get us. If you want to look at our products and everything we sort of do at a quick glance and our newsletters and all that cool stuff, just go to hub.echo.ai. So that's hub.echo, AECHO.ai. Quick clarification, it's always AECHO. I know the name's weird, but that's how it is. You'll find everything there, our podcast to everything else. Not
Excellent.
podcast,
Excellent.
sorry, our newsletters. Sorry for that little
Oh,
mess up.
okay.
Yep.
I was going to say, you have a podcast? I need to listen to this.
Not yet.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Well, thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure. And thank you, everybody, for listening and watching. You can find this podcast on YouTube and Spotify, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you so much.